Okay, we are live on YouTube. You may go ahead.
Welcome, guys. On behalf of co-chair Utley and I want to welcome you and anybody watching at home today. I guess everybody's got the agenda in front of you and had a chance to look at it. Does the clerk have the roll call taken?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have a declaration of conflict of interest? Seeing none, we'll move on. Let me get a mover and seconder for everything we're going to be talking about today, if I could, please. Moved by Councillor Celeste, seconded by Councillor Carpenter. Thank you very much. We've been a while since we've been together, so I think rather than separate any items, we'll review each and every one, if that's okay with everybody. Some of them have work associated, some don't. So let's, we don't have a presentation or a delegation today that I know of. So let's fire into item 4.1. And if we look at the action items, the first of the items was relocating the bronzes and adding an 8th bronze figure. And that, I guess these resolutions are before us to be voted on today. Is that correct, Sarah? Hi.
Hi, Sarah Monroe, Manager of Tourism, Culture and Sport. The recommendations in front of you today are simply recommendations, so to allow you to complete the correct process to bring forward the recommendations to council and therefore direct staff.
Right, okay, so these are before us for the first time today. So if everybody's had a chance to look at them, is there comment on the very first item, the relocation of the bronzes and the additional work? I think it pretty much summarizes some of the discussions that we've had. Whoops. Uh-oh. Sorry, I'm on the wrong item. We've got the first item is the landscaping at Jubilee Terrace Park. My apologies, guys. So concept 2, which we've all seen, including the lighting.
I have a point of order.
Go ahead.
So I'm looking at I think I'm looking at the, through you, Chair, the right agenda. I've got 4.1, completion of the Howitzer site and the storyboard review.
Right.
So is that what we're talking about?
Actually, if you click on item 4, instead of 4.1, go to item 4.
Sorry, if I could, through the chair, just to clarify. So there was a number of resolutions or recommendations that staff drafted yesterday in order to move forward with some of these items. Those draft recommendations were included in the chair's roadmap and just loaded to eScribe this morning. I could share the screen so that everyone's looking at the same thing. So staff, to answer that question, have drafted a number of motions that require some steps to have it completed. And what I can do is share that to the screen so that everyone is looking at the same a resolution that staff are recommending this task force working group move to get things moving forwards. If that assists.
Yes, go ahead, please. Yeah, that's a big help. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, well, another point of order. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Are we authorized as a committee to direct staff to do certain things?
This will come to council before it's effective. So, Mayor, these are recommendations that we're making today that will come to council probably this month, I would think.
Okay.
Through the chair, in regards to the Howitzer working group, any recommendations that you have, they will need to be ratified. They will go to committee of the whole for the December month and ratified at the council for December.
Thank you for that clarity.
Well,
yeah.
Another
question?
question?
Mayor, yes.
What's concept 2 and what's the cost? And sorry, I've never been to this committee before, but just wondering what it is.
Well, it's of all the concepts that were numbered, it was the one that was number 2. And the cost, I don't really know the cost. I believe we saw an early estimate of that a number of months ago, but it's not It's not included in the recommendation. Let's see. Sorry, here we are. Now, wait a minute, I'm on a different item here, sorry. So what we've got is changes to War Memorial Park, which is, yeah, so that's 4.1.3. Yeah, I think I'm on a different, package here.
I'm sorry, if you could just hold with me, Mr. Chair. For some reason, we're
Sure.
sharing a motion that's not the same one that you're speaking of.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get the correct one up for you.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
first motion that I believe that you were looking to discuss was the landscaping at Jubilee Terrace Park. And I believe in regards to answers, Brian Hughes is here to, as he had presented that originally. And I will work with Melanie in the background to get this on.
Okay, so what I'm looking at, guys, is actually listed item 4 items for consideration, not 4.1. So there are 2 items. One is landscaping at Jubilee Terrace Park, and the second is storyboard at Jubilee Terrace Park. That's item 4.0. If you've got the same agenda package I have, if you just click on four items for consideration, that should bring those 2 items up for you, rather than going to 4.1. Does everybody see that? Okay.
If I could maybe just, I could, Mr. Chair, maybe say something, maybe would help out this discussion. Staff met yesterday. Clerk staff did an excellent job of doing the history. This committee was originally started to do a couple of tasks. They have been pretty much completed, and then it added on to its mandated, which was then approved by council. There's a number of directions went to staff that didn't go to council. And then staff are feeling, and with COVID thrown in the middle, since the last time we met in February, everybody got busy, but staff didn't feel comfortable moving forth on a number of the suggestions to them. And so you're going to see a long list. Staff met yesterday, and you can see they've done a great job in preparing motions to get us kind of back on track into a clerkship mode. That's kind of within council's priorities and things like that. So seems like there's a lot of resolutions, but I think when we met yesterday as staff, we feel if these, whatever form they take, they'll get us back on right track through a council process. So that's why it's a little awkward at the moment, but that's why there's so many resolutions here. But we're hoping this gets us back on the right track.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. That's excellent, Brian, and thanks to staff for putting this together in something of a hurried manner, and yet it looks extremely good. It's what we've been talking about all along. Mayor, did you have any other points of order you wanted to raise?
Well, I just got questions. I mean,
Yep.
I'm feeling really uncomfortable. Like, I'm sorry I didn't come to a meeting in January, but recommending something to council, the concept plan's not attached. I've never seen it. I guess it's my fault I didn't go and get it, but I didn't even know this resolution was going to be considered, and the cost. I mean, seems a little unusual.
Well, it probably does seem a little unusual, but I would remind you that staff have tailored the what's before us today to reflect what committee has worked on for these number of months. My apologies, Mayor, that it's not informative for someone who hasn't been on the committee previously. But what we're dealing with today is what we're dealing with today, and I'm sure Sarah and Brian can answer any specific questions you may have related to any of these resolutions. Okay.
Well, with all due respect, Chair, I think kind of my reaction is going to be the reaction of the councilors that haven't been part of the deliberations here. They're going to be asking all the same kinds of questions, and if we as a task force, the committee, I guess, pushing this up to council, don't you think we need a better package?
Well, I wouldn't say a better package, but when this goes to council, it certainly will include all the preliminary work and discussion points that committee has enjoyed knowledge of. I would think that you're quite correct, Mayor, that what goes to council is going to be for a completely different audience, which is going to have to be more fully informed than committee is today. Sorry, that I shouldn't say as committee is today, but certainly as you are today, Mayor, not having a background in this info. So it's noted, and when it goes to council, it will include a background paper as well. Okay. So So for the landscaping in Jubilee Park, we've got the budget in there. My apologies that you don't have a drawing to look at. I don't know if staff can put that, can find that quickly and post it before we conclude our business today. The committee did consider a number of options, and that's the option that was agreed by the majority of committee members as put forward by staff.
Through the chair, in response to your request to have the concept plan put up, unfortunately, I did not have that through Brian Hughes. I'm not sure if there is an electronic copy, or Sarah Monroe.
Yeah, okay. No, it's nobody's fault, certainly. The fact that it's not in the package, as I said, is, it's unfortunate that it's not available for the mayor to see, but members of the committee have enjoyed looking at this and commenting on it. Go ahead, Mayor.
Where's the budget? Where's a detailed budget for this? And I'm not to be obstructive. I'm just like, I think the questions I'm asking are pretty simple. Where's the budget for it?
Are you looking at the item before us, Mayor? The budget for
There it is.
Jubilee is $100,000. Sarah, did you want to jump in?
Yes, I just wanted to let you know that those items were forwarded to the clerk, so you have them in front of you. Those were received at a previous meeting of this task force. However, I'm also forwarding them from Vicky Armitage from Parks.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Utley, you're next in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going back over the minutes of our meeting. So on October 2019, the committee or the working group recommended through Councillor Carpenter and yourself, Mr. Chair, that $100,000 from the council priorities contingency fund be reallocated for the rehabilitation of Jubilee Terrace Park and relocation of the cannon, and that was carried. What hasn't happened is I don't believe that item has come to committee of the whole or council, probably as a result of the COVID pandemic. But designs were presented by Parks and Rec through Vicky, and we selected item 2 to move forward. And I think the committee felt very strongly that the current location of the cannon was not the best location, and that's something better be designed and installed so that the cannon can be lit from the ground up. So it can be seen very clearly for 2 reasons. One is that it'll show the cannon in its full glory day and night, and the lighting will we hope have a positive effect on preventing vandalism. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor, thank you. Mayor, I see nobody else wanting to speak on this item yet, so you may go ahead, please.
Yeah, I knew enough about it to think it was a good idea, but I'm concerned that we don't have a budget. We don't have approval from council for this expenditure. Like I said, it goes up to council, and then normally doesn't it go to estimates to work it in with all our other spending priorities? Just seems to me that a little bit different process is going on here. But so is there a budget for this? Is there a detailed budget, what the cost of lighting will be, and or is this number just picked out of?
Well, no, the number was arrived at by members of the committee in consultation with staff, all of whom felt that that was an appropriate number to budget to this process to allow us to do the work. But in terms of a detailed budget, I'm not sure to what detail Parks and Recreation staff are fully confident of the number. But as a group, staff and committee members were quite satisfied that the work could be accomplished within that window, Mayor.
Well, this goes to council. We better have, for committee of the whole, I would respectfully suggest a little more detail would be helpful. Plus, point of order, I mean, the resolution I'm looking at in this draft resolution doesn't have the dollar amount in it, so. Because I mean, e-scribe, I'm looking at it. Oh, I guess just had to scroll down. Yeah, I've got it now in e-scribe. So. I'm good, Chair.
Oops, sorry, Mayor. Was there anything else?
Not at this point.
Okay, Councillor Carpenter, then Councillor Sless.
Yes, I believe we met at Jubilee Park at our last meeting with staff and with the numbers that was approved by the committee. I'm not aware. I think staff will have to update us on what has gone to council and what hasn't gone to council. I was assuming that all this has gone to council, but if it hasn't, then that's an error at some point. But the Parks and Rec had looked at the budget and we went over what items they were going to replace. The sidewalk, they were keeping right away for the road back, for the widening of the road, talked about where the new sidewalk could be, a walkway, talked about a light that would be attached to the armories, and the storyboard. So all of that was part of the discussion, and it was going staff had a rough budget at that time and were to finalize the budget. I would have expected to see the actual budget here today, but it's not.
Thank you, Councillor Sless.
Yeah, just along the same line, Mr. Chair, I'm looking at the minutes from the February 10th meeting, the last meeting that we had, and it indicates there that it was actually Councillor Carpenter that asked what the design would cost, and he was advised that staff would get the estimate and report back. I presume that's the estimate that we're trying to find now. Does anybody know where that estimate is as far as getting finalized?
Is there a member of staff that can comment?
Hello, this is Dave Zimmer here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Hi. Actually, I got, I'm getting a really bad echo here. When I saw this email last night come through, I looked at the site plan that we had prepared and the budget, and we've spent this morning going over the numbers to ensure that 100,000 would be enough to accomplish what we're trying to do here. I have a detailed budget that outlines 20 items, ranging from how you build a site, from getting geotech to survey information, right through to site restoration, including a 10% contingency. And we are at $111,260.05. And I can provide these numbers. They're fairly accurate. Like I said, we went over all the quantities this morning, and based on what numbers we have been receiving this year, and this year has been totally nuts, as you can all imagine. I think that this represents a pretty realistic budget moving forward for next year. You know, it's always a a gamble when you tender stuff, but we've been lucky that we're usually pretty bang on with our numbers. So I can provide that information if you need it right now.
If it's possible to do it in quick order, that would be fine, Dave. If not, we could receive it later. Okay.
Okay.
And thank you very much for that detailed info. Members of council, having heard that number, would somebody be prepared to amend the budget number that's in the report? Councillor Utley, and a seconder, Councillor Sless, thank you. Councillor Utley, what would be the number that you would amend?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say an upset limit of $112,000,
Okay, so that's.
if that's okay with the seconder.
Yeah. Is that fine, John? Yeah, okay. Any discussion on the amendment on the budget? Yes, John. Councillor Sless, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm starting to get confused now. At one point, we were talking about 100,000 coming out of the, I forget what it was, council priorities or corporate contingency, one of those two. And now I'm reading that it's going to go to estimates. Where is it going?
Chair, if I can through you, I would just like to clarify in regards to that motion that was carried back in 2019 for the $100,000 to come from the corporate contingency reserve fund. That motion that was carried by the working group did not get ratified by council. It did not come forwards thereafter. And there has been some discussion, and staff involved can correct me if I'm wrong, that the corporate contingency reserve, due to the recent circumstances, may not be the appropriate place for this funding to come from. So the request now is that it be referred to the estimates process, to the upset limit, if that's what the working group so desires. If you are still seeking for it to come from the corporate contingency reserve fund, by all means, you can amend it to do so. Somebody is whispering, sorry. Okay. If you want to request for it to come through or direct that it go through the corporate contingency reserve fund, you may amend to do so. However, there has been some discussion that that may be a difficult funding source at this time.
Go ahead,
If I could
Councillor.
just, yeah, if I could just continue then, Mr. Chair. Is council priorities, is that fund just about tapped? I think it is, but I'm not positive. We don't have anybody from finance here, but I wonder if anybody knows or has a pretty good idea of what. I don't think there's a whole lot left in.
Through the chair, I'm not with finance, but just in discussion with other motions previously through the clerk's office, I believe, yes, it is tapped.
So is that the reason that the resolution is before us, because the funding just isn't available from the source that we'd originally specified? Julie?
That is correct, yes. And to have that referred, and then as well the request for the Heritage Committee involvement as well. Okay,
thank you. Anything else, Councillor Sless?
I guess my only concern is when it gets thrown into that mix of at estimates, it could get drowned out. I guess I have a concern with that. We're quite a ways down the road with this, and if it could get cut off at the knees just because of the situation. So just a comment.
So this staff, this is a completely unfunded capital project. Could you suggest a wording that we could employ perhaps today to elevate this to a project that would be instead of considered by estimates committee to be approved by estimates committee, or some such way that we can increase its priority funding?
We can take that. I'm just trying to get a hold of Joelle to see how much money was in the council priority fund, but I think Julie has responded that well. It's been used a fair bit with a whole bunch of things. So I think she's pretty accurate in the fact that I think we're pretty close to exhausted that account. But the short answer is back to we can look at some wording, Councillor. It's Mr. Chair, Chair McCreary on this to put forth for the estimates committee to as you're suggesting.
Can you remind me, Mr. Hutchings, if there was a when Finance Committee and then Council deemed it prudent to strip every last nickel out of our cultural capital support for museum partners. Was that money dedicated to any specific fund, or was that simply returned to general revenues?
This is the fund you're talking about through the casino that was approved last month. Is that what you're referring to, Chair?
Yes, the previously well-endowed fund, which had its balances reduced to zero.
It's was reduced to zero to fund the other initiatives for the casino revenues that aren't coming in at the moment. It's trying to balance those out. So it didn't go to general revenues. It went out to general the other funding sources that we required.
Okay, all right. So we have the amendment on the floor then. I didn't see any other hands up for further discussion. Oh, sorry, Councillor, go ahead. Councillor Carper.
I would suggest that we, this motion be redirected to the Parks and Rec capital budget. And they can put that in the mix of their capital budget. It's got to go somewhere if it's coming forward estimates. I suggest it be part, this is a park, city park. So it should go to Parks and Rec capital budget. All the work's been done on it. And then it can be approved with their total capital package for Parks and Rec. And then, as Councillor Sless says, it won't get lost in the mix.
Okay, so let's try to arrive then at a proper wording for that. Councillor Carpenter, do you want to give us what you think the actual wording should be?
Well, I would suggest that the resolution be that this item be referred to the Parks and Rec capital budget, be brought forward at estimates as part of the capital works projects for Parks and Rec.
Okay. Councillor Slush, you okay with that being friendly?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. But I just wonder, have we exhausted, has staff gone through every potential place to get a grant or from upper levels, or if there's community groups that would take this on as a project? Has that road been gone down?
Is there a staff member that can comment?
Through the chair, there are some community grants, but they typically relate to anniversaries. So 100th anniversary, 150th anniversary. If the task force would like staff to look into alternate funding sources, they can make this as an amendment to the resolution on the floor in front of them right now.
Mr. Chair, I wouldn't want this to be held up because we're doing that, but if we could do it in parallel, and if we get lucky somewhere, then we can reduce the capital need. But we should be trying to get anything we can elsewhere before we go into our own pockets, if that's possible.
Okay. Councillor, what would you think about introducing that later in the agenda once we've worked our way through all the items, because there'll be some other funding as well, and that way it won't be tagged to any particular item or each item. How would that sound?
Once again, you come up with a magic solution.
Oh, okay, so we'll try to remember to come back to that then. Okay. John, Councillor Rutley, did you have your hand up for this point?
I did, Mr. Chair, but Councillor Slass asked the question I was going to ask. Thank you.
Okie doke. So we'll go then to the question on the amendment, which has been friendly amended. Does everybody remember what we're dealing with here, or do we need to see it on the screen?
Can we put it up on the screen one more time, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I will put that up. Just give me a quick moment here.
Okay, so we're on the amendment now. The amendment being the change in the dollar amount. And the last bullet point. So we'll go to the question. Those in favor? Hands up. Anybody opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. All right, so the next item we're going to be dealing with then is called Storyboard at Jubilee Terrace Park.
Mr. Chair, may I,
Yes, Mr. Co-Chair.
before we leave 4.1, Councillor Van Tilborg questioned the committee if they should consider changing the title of the committee to a title that more reflects what the committee does as the Howitzer canon is complete. And I wonder if this is the right time to make that. It's unfortunate that, in fact, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, in the 4.3, it comes up again. So ignore what I said and we can address that later. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're, the clerk can remind me of, did we just deal with the amendment and not the main motion?
That is correct. The
Okay.
main motion was not
Yeah.
carried. If you could
So
just do a vote.
Yeah,
for
so
that.
we'll go to, before we go to the next item, we'll finish the one we're on. So those in favor of the main motion as amended and friendly amended, please raise your hands. Okay, thank you. All right, now we're on to Storyboard at Jubilee Terrace Park. And it is on the floor. Discussions. Co-Chair Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wondered if we've heard anything from GW CA on where they are with this storyboard. You know, I was under the impression that they were taking ownership of this and funding it as well, but I'm just not sure where this is and if staff have any idea what the status of this is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Through the chair, staff were not involved in these conversations. So the conversation was with the GWCA and members of this task force, but staff have not been contacted about this.
Councilor Utley, you still have the floor if you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ms. Monroe, how would you like to take ownership of this? Yeah, that was a good segue to your comment. At some point, I believe, Mr. Chair, that Ms. Monroe and her group have to take ownership of it. It needs to be approved by the I can't remember the name of the committee, and maybe it has to be run by Heritage as well. But could you explain what the process should be, please?
Through the chair, we can certainly take ownership of this. I'm assuming that your contact was Joffrey or Megan from the GWCA. Yeah. So we can definitely connect with them. The process for this is that any kind of text or amendments to the park would go through the Public Art Subcommittee as an educational component to the public art collection. And because it's an amendment, a physical amendment to the park would need to go through the Heritage Committee as well, because this is a designated heritage park. The next step would then be for staff to work with the GWCA on the language as well as the photographs. So the recommended motion that we have in front of you allows you to follow the steps that you would need to make sure that the language included in that text is approved by all parties and is reviewed by our communications department as well as designed by our communications team. At this point, we do not know if the GWCA was planning to pay for that. If not, we could tap into the Public Art Reserve for up to 50% of funding because it is educational and related to a piece of the capital P public art collection.
Thank you, Sarah. Mr. Chair, I'd be willing to move the recommendation from Ms. Monroe but we'll wait for more discussion. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carpenter, okay, if we go to the amendment before I come to you for speaking? Is that okay?
Sure. Are you talking about speaking to the amendment or voting on the amendment?
Well, you had your hand up. You were next in the queue.
Okay,
So we'll go to Councillor Utley's amendment then. Is that fine with you, Councillor?
sure.
Okay, Councillor Utley, go ahead and introduce the amendment.
Can we have that put up on the screen, please?
Sorry, through the chair, are you looking for the amendment to be put on the screen?
No, if you could put the recommendation up on the screen, please.
The original recommendation, sure.
Thank you. So we know clearly what's being recommended here. Yeah, I'm quite happy to move this.
Okay, the amendment,
If I can
Councillor
get a
Utley?
second there.
Sorry, the amendment, Councillor Utley. What was your amendment?
The
That staff be directed to take the lead?
yes, yeah, and find again, we'd need to find a funding source.
Okay. Seconder. Councillor Sliss, thank you. Councillor Carpenter, did you want to speak on this?
Yes, I met with Mr. Joffrey's 3 or 4 weeks ago. They're already with the storyboard, as I understand it, and they have some funding for it. So certainly, if the 50% is eligible, that would help them and us for their future endeavors. They're trying to also recreate what they've done with World War I and World War II, and we certainly wouldn't want to lose those archives. They are also have to be dealt with as this group is probably looking at winding down sometime in the future, but they're all ready to go. So I think the approach is we just haven't had the staff contact them. Given staff the authority to contact them to take the lead on this, we'll actually solve this and get it moving forward. They'd like to get it done by January, so we'd like to get moving as well.
Excellent, thank you, Councillor. I have the mayor next and then Councillor Sliss on the amendment.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty mystified since when do we get involved in designing storyboards? I mean, isn't that typically a lot of parks have storyboards and just part of the project? Staff does it, and like we're designing the storyboard here. Like, man, talk about getting down in the weeds on this. So like I'm just trying to understand this process, and I'm shaking my head, but I guess the important thing is there's no question there needs to be a storyboard there so people understand why this canon is there. It seems like a very strange process to me, but if it gets it done, it gets it done.
Mayor, you're concerned because it identifies two separate groups of people that are responsible for the wording?
Well, I've never seen us get into this kind of detail on designing a park. That's my concern. It's like, does that go to the amendment? I guess it does, because we're trying to determine how the storyboard and who's doing it. And just, I guess as a stranger to this committee, I'm trying to figure it out.
Well, the language and the design of the storyboard initially was going to be sourced by the GWCA, Great War Centenary Association. It would then come to staff and committee for approval. So I don't know that that's unusual. It's a third-party item that's going to be erected on one of our facilities. So we obviously want the last say. Sarah, go ahead.
Through the chair, I also just want to make sure that the committee is aware that only 50% of the storyboard project can be funded through the Public Art Reserve through recommendation from the Public Arts Subcommittee. Staff are not aware how much this storyboard is going to cost, and we haven't received any kind of commitment in writing from the GWCA. So that funding source would need to be identified in the bracketed portion in the motion as well.
Thank you. Anything else, Mayor?
No,
Councilor Sless, I believe you're in the queue.
Just wanted to get a number on what's in this public art fund. Does anybody know?
Through the chair, I don't have the most recent updated numbers, but there are very strict restrictions on how that public art reserve can be used through corporate policy 035.
Can you give me a rough estimate?
I'm sorry, I really can't because there's multiple projects on the go with money coming in and out of that account, but we do receive $35,000 per year towards that account.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, what's the source of that endowment to the account?
To be honest, I'm not 100% sure. The majority of arts projects are funded through the casino reserve, so that would be my first instinct, but that would be a question that would have to be relayed to Joelle in finance. Hopefully
we didn't strip that cupboard bare as well. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have this before us now. We'll go to the question on the amendment if I'm following myself. Those in favor on the amendment? And then to the main motion. Any additional discussion, guys? Councilor Carpenter, then Mayor.
Yeah, I just sort of to maybe help the mayor out. When we would meet, we had the Great War Centenary group. It's larger than this group that meets, and I was hoping that they would all be here. Actually, we could have some of these questions answered. They should have been invited to this meeting. But those groups, as well as the 56th Field Regiment, is involved. 56th Field Regiment is involved because the light will actually be on their building, so that brings them into the picture. Also, the wording is the Great War Centenary is to make sure that the wording is actually accurate to the name, why the cannon's there, and what battalions were the ones that won that as part of the trophy, so that the wording is correct. And then, of course, that's why it needs to go to the Heritage Committee and the Arts Committee as well for that education piece, as well as to make sure it's correct. So that's kind of why there's so many involved. And it was, guess, one of those kind of meetings where we were sitting around and we would say, oh, who could do this? And the Great War Centenary group said, we'll step up and do this. And the 56th Field Regiment said, we'll step up and do this. So that's kind of how everybody started getting in what they would do. And Parks and Rec said, we can do a design plan for the park. And that's kind of how this all came together. The follow-up just hasn't happened since COVID. And I think that's where we've kind of fallen on it by the wayside here.
Good summary, Councilor. Councilor Sless.
I think the mayor was next.
Yeah.
My apologies for overlooking your hand, Mayor. Go ahead, please.
I feel like I'm being stifled. But seriously, okay, I guess I'm just having to adapt. It's a little different than I guess what I'm used to seeing, but the goal is a good goal, which is to finish off properly the restoration of the cannon and the park itself, so that the public understands what it's been done and what it represents. So that's all good. But got a problem with this resolution. This is like a blank check. There's no dollar amount in here. So I've got a real concern with that. And I'm wondering then are we kind of just trying to throw too much into this resolution? We're one hand trying to come up with the process to finalize the design and placement, but at the same time we're being asked to recommend to council a budget for it, and with no dollar amount. That's different than what I'm used to saying.
Mayor, would you like to introduce an upset amount?
I've got no information upon which to make such a decision.
Your amendment could reflect your comfort level. I did see Councillor Carpenter's hand go up. So Mayor, we'll just leave that for a bit. Councillor Carpenter, when it becomes his turn, may have a number in mind.
Just trying to learn the ways of this committee.
Well, we are a bit of an odd duck because we have two community partners that have been very strong in advocating for all this and who actually want to make contributions, which we seldom see, Mayor, by way of further explanation.
Well, shouldn't it be two-step then? We get the process in place to finish off the design and the wording, and then it comes back to us, and by then there's sort of an estimate and a cost that we can then send up to committee of the whole, council, and estimates. That's why we're trying to do too much in this one resolution.
Well, we have all the time in the world for amendments today. We can certainly make this look like something that everybody can support. Anything else, Mayor, on this speaking opportunity?
Oh, well, I have to sit here and think about amendments. So go ahead to the next speaker.
Councillor Celeste, you're next in the queue, then Councillor Carpenter, then Councillor Utley.
Yeah, it was just Councillor Carpenter mentioned about the 56th Field Regiment and the armories and the lighting. I'm not sure if I'm remembering correctly, but didn't they say that they could access funds too, that through their channels, they might be able to participate financially as well? Again, I guess, have we followed up or had the opportunity to follow up to see if there's anything concrete there?
I believe they committed to the expense involved in providing the lighting on the building.
I thought it went a little further, Mr. Chair. Maybe I'm not remembering correctly, but it's their building. It's a city park, but it's their grounds, and I thought that maybe they had access to money that we don't have access to because of who they are and who we're not.
Right. We're all short on memory these days, Councillor. We haven't met for quite a while, but I believe the park boundary is the driveway belongs to them, and city property probably begins at the south curb on that driveway. So I don't think their generosity extended to anything that would be constructed in our park. That's kind of my recollection. Anything else? Councillor Celeste? Councillor Carpenter, go ahead, please.
I think the mayor is correct on this, where we expected, I think most of us expected to see a budget here already prepared. So I think what the resolution should be that we direct, maybe CEO Hutchings can help us here, but we should, a resolution that directs staff to prepare a budget, to meet with all the groups, the Field Regiment, the Great War Centenary Group, see where we are, prepare a budget and a time frame plan to come back to us as soon as possible, so we could recommend something to council for approval. That would include the budget, the time frame, and the scope of the work. Obviously, the scope of the work is going to change substantially because there's a lot of work here that that isn't going to happen in this year's budget, considering everything that's going on. But maybe a work plan that Mr. Hutchings could come back with after having discussion with 56th Field Regiment and the Great War Centenary Group and staff about how this would work. But we need a work plan and a budget.
So, Councillor, would you suggest then striking the 5th clause in its entirety that speaks to the funding and replacing that with something else? I
don't have these clauses because I'm looking at the at what was sent to me as the minutes on right.
Our apologies, Councillor. Whoops. Okay, there we have it. So, Councillor Carpenter, my suggestion would be that you move to delete the 5th clause and add additional wording that you've just said.
Yeah, I'm looking for some input from the CAO here on ways to move this forward in a cohesive fashion that's productive. Before I expected some of this stuff had already gone to council. It hasn't. So because that hasn't happened, we now have to put together a work plan and a budget and have some consultation.
Okay. Thank you.
Exactly, Council Carpenter, right. There's a history here that the clerk's office put together, and I'm not sure why, but a number of these things have never been taken to council for council approval to direct staff. So much of the things we're talking about here right now, not staff's reluctance. I want to be very clear on that. It's just that they didn't have direction and funding. It was there's 3 or 4 large motions here this committee have never gone to council. So council didn't have the authority to move ahead on them. So I think if we move these motions, they go to council, we'll put together a plan and bring that back to this committee. But and we had COVID in the middle of it as well. Okay.
Couldn't hear you, Dan.
Councilor Carpenter, was there anything further that you wanted to add?
No, I think we can sort this out.
Okay, I think I have Councilor Utley next, then the mayor, then I think Councilor Celeste. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My recollection is that there's no dollar amount besides the storyboard, because my understanding was that GWCA were going to cover the cost of this item, and I think that's where some of the confusion comes from. So I think the first thing I'd like to see staff do is to contact GWCA and understand where they're at with this project, and if they're covering the full cost of the storyboard plus installation, or just the storyboard itself, and then the city will cover the cost of the. We need to determine those 2 things, and I think if we can get some, Ms. Monroe could contact GWCA and determine where they're at, so we can understand if any funds are needed or not. I'm sure something will be needed for installation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Julia, go ahead and jump in.
Thank you. Through the chair. So in regards to this, currently what's on the floor is an amended version in which instead of the working group working on it, the staff are taking ownership for this. Might I suggest, just from reviewing this, due to the fact that there is no estimate for the storyboard, there's some discussion about who may or may not have funding for this, that that through this motion it be amended that it state that staff be directed to finalize the proposed storyboard in consultation with the GWCA, and I believe, sorry, it was the Armory as well. Councillor Carpenter, was that accurate?
Yes, I believe that, yes.
Yes, regarding the budget and scope for installation of the storyboard, that the approved storyboard wording and imagery be referred to the Public Arts Subcommittee. I don't think, even regardless of a budget, that's not harmful to do to move forwards with that, and that it be worked on through communications as well, and that the storyboard be designed in consultation with communications and community engagement. And instead of putting a funding source in there, that if any funding is necessary in regards to the installation and scope of the storyboard, that staff be directed to report back to the working group for further funding sources. So right now you're not approving any funding. You're starting the process if you were to do this, and if there's any required monies beyond, because we're not aware of what the GWCA has available and the 50% of coverage here, that if there's anything that would require city extra budget, that it would come back to your working group for approval and consideration.
So Councilor Utley, are you prepared to introduce that amendment to what's before us?
Only if Councillor Carpenter seconds it.
I think that's a deal. Okay. Councilor Utley, you still have the floor if you wish.
I'm all done, thanks.
My apologies, guys. I've completely lost track. I'm going to say the mayor is next because his hand was closest to the screen.
Like that. If I do it like that, so I catch your attention. So I'm kind of an outsider here, but I'm going to give you my take on this in relation to this amendment. It strikes me that the problem here has been not enough specific direction to the staff, right? And clearly understanding what we're authorized to do as this committee and what we have to go to council to get approval for. And staff can't really be expected to, act on kind of verbal request to do this and that. I mean, I just don't think that's fair to them. So if I could see this amendment come up, because I had in mind an amendment I want to bring forward, but I think this might do it. So Julie, do you have that? I know you were verbalizing it, but I also suspect you were probably typing something.
Yes, sorry, through the chair, I will put this up. So it is going to come up on the screen here, and through the chair, just so you're aware, it's kind of an inclusion of the amendments. It's not the exact amendment itself, but essentially this is striking out in regards to the funding itself and adding an additional clause that if any funding is required from the city budget through consultation with GWCA, that staff be required to report back to the working group for further approval.
Okay, Mayor, are you satisfied with that?
Yeah, I had something similar in mind, but actually like that better. So.
Sorry, guys, I'm having trouble with my button. So we'll consider this to be the amendment that's before us. If there's no further discussion, let's go ahead and vote. Oh, John, sorry, Councillor Utley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to amend the second from last bullet, that public works staff be directed to install a storyboard in Jubilee to no later than Q3 2021.
Is that friendly to the seconder? I see it's friendly to the seconder. Okay. Any other discussion, guys? Councillor Carpenter.
Just on the recommendation of staff that the funding be required from a city budget, the staff report back to the working group with recommendations. Thank you.
I see that's friendly to Councillor Utley, so that's inclusive. Okay, now to the question. Those in favor? And that's unanimous. And then on to the main motion. Those in favor? Main motion is amended, rather. Those in favor, and that's unanimous as well. Thank you. Okay, so now our next item of business is going to be the item which is called relocating the 7 bronze figures and adding 8th bronze figure. So that'll be the next one that we're on to here. And I'll remind committee that all the items are on the floor, moved and seconded already. So discussion, Mayor, go ahead.
What's on the floor? I mean, I'm in East Grove. Okay, now it's coming. There we go.
Okay, so the item that we're considering currently is called relocating the 7 bronze figures. That's the title. There we go.
Ooh, I got something to say about that.
You still have the floor, Mayor.
Yeah, okay, so I'm concerned about this because it seems to me that the last resolution passed by council, which actually the previous council, said that we were directed to, this committee directed to investigate with recommendations, budget, funding source, and timelines. 1, additional engraving to add the missing names of the phone. I guess that's coming later. Completion of the Brant County War Memorial, namely the addition of Allward's design sculpture. Is this what this is about? Is this completing the design sculpture? Because C was improvements to the surrounding grounds to better accommodate emergency services, which I think is a later resolution. So I'm just wondering what this is and how does it fit into our mandate?
Well, this is the completion of the Allward vision for the site. The bronzes were not part of the initial site design. There was an uncompleted component which could not be afforded back in the 30s. So those are the items that this deals with, namely completion of the vision for the site and relocation of the bronzes, which were not original equipment, so to speak. Sarah, go ahead, please.
Through the chair, the resolution that was just on the screen as a recommendation only refers to the 7 bronze figures and adding the 8th figure due to the budget limitations back in the 90s. So those 8 figures were never part of Allward's original design. So the relocation alludes to the fact that this task force is looking to relocate them onto the same site as the war memorial. There's then a complementary resolution that recommends that staff investigate the cost of completing Allward's original design, which included 2 additional figures. So we've got 2 resolutions here that kind of work in tandem. Does that make sense to everybody? I know it's a very confusing project scope, but the original Allward design, those 8 figures were never meant to be on the original monument. But when the committee worked to add those figures, they wanted 8, but could only afford 7.
Okay, so just to complete, so I do have concerns. Maybe it's an uninformed concern, but our community, this monument, cenotaph, it's sacred grounds, right? And the community has become so used to how it looks as it looks, right? And so this will change the look of it. And people may become very upset because even though it matches in some part what the original design was, it may get people upset just because it's a change to something that's sacred. So just wondering if has there been a public input process so the community understands what we're trying to do? And I'm sorry I don't have the history. I'm just like asking this question. So
Mayor, if you'll take a look at the final bullet, Mayor, in the resolution before us, it calls for a community consultation to determine community interest and support for or against.
Yeah, but how does this fit into the mandate? I'm having trouble understanding how that fits into the mandate that we've got.
Is there some part of the mandate that you're not clear on, Mayor?
Well, we're mandated to deal with additional engraving, okay? Improvements to the surrounding grounds to better accommodate Remembrance Day services. And B was completing the Brant County War Memorial, namely the addition of Allward's design sculpture. So maybe I'm being too technical, but this, because I don't understand where the moving of these other fixtures, how that figures into this.
Well, that's undoing changes to the monument and really completing it as originally designed by the sculptor. Colonel Hatfield from 56th Field Regiment had some thoughts about how we could more properly display those bronzes. And his idea at the time was to provide it on a complementary site and perhaps to be able to get this work done in advance of the anniversary of the liberation of Europe, which would be, help me out here, somebody, whatever the dates are for that. I think that was going to be happening in 21 or 22. So does that help a bit, Mayor?
And how do we refer something to estimates committee that we don't have a costing on?
Well, obviously, we're going to need to be able to have an estimate prepared for estimates committee if in fact it's going to make it there in order to be considered.
Like, for example, let's say it comes back to us at $3 million. That might change whether I recommend to go to estimates committee, right?
Yes, possibly. I'll remind the mayor, though, that no city project, including the new city hall, has ever gone over budget.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the reputation of this committee. And if we are setting up the estimates committee, projects that the rest of the council looks at and goes, what were you thinking? That affects the reputation of the committee. And I think we run the risk of kind of a blank check here, just sending this up to estimates committee without really knowing what we're sending up in terms of the cost. Just making that observation.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Rutley, then Councilor Carpenter, then Councilor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is exceptionally sensitive, in my estimation, and it needs to be handled with the utmost respect. And I think definitely we need to put at least the concept of this to committee of the whole and council and the community before we start to make any decisions. I think there needs to be, based on the feedback we've had from the 56 and some others, that there needs to be, why was the cenotaph designed and built where it is right now, and what were the parameters around that, around the cenotaph. And I know our MP McCormick is very sensitive to moving the statues, and there may be other groups, the Legions, our Heritage Museum, Military Heritage Museum, and other groups that need to be fully consulted in this process before we do anything. And then if there is agreement, then we'll need to somehow cost this thing out. It's not going to be cheap, but it's certainly, we want to honor the fallen who served our country and our community in the most appropriate way and respectful way. So I think it just needs a lot more discussion and debate with those groups to appreciate what needs to be done and how it should be done. And I'll leave it there for now, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Councilor, thank you. Councilor Carpenter, I believe you're up next.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with the mayor again here. I don't think this should be referred to estimates. I think the cost that should be referred back to the committee. We should find out the cost, and we should decide whether that's something we want to do at this point or not, because we need to have the information. Having the information, it's hard to recommend something to estimates without having the information, because the information will be there when it comes to estimates, and then you're going to have the whole community and everybody enraged and estimates about what kind of expense here. When we were doing this, there was room in the budget. There is not that room now. So I would like us to take out where it says be referred to estimates committee, be referred back to this committee. And then this resolution could go to council to be approved, so that at least council's approving that we're even looking at it. I think the next one about the additional names of the fallen is really what is the most important piece for next year. Thank you.
Councilor, would you be prepared to move that amendment right now? Before we lose it?
I am.
Okay. And you have Councilor Rutley as a secretary. Could you just restate it one more time, please?
That the cost of the new site installation and acquisition of the bronze figures be referred back to the committee for review.
And that's in place of being referred to estimates?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Okay, let's go to the vote on that amendment then. Moved by Councilor Carpenter, second by Councilor Rutley. Those in favor? And that's unanimous as well. Thank you very much. Anything else, Councilor Carpenter?
No, that's fine.
Okay, Councilor Slush, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just need my memory refreshed, Mr. Mayor, or Mr. Chairman. The eighth figure, what is that?
I have no recollection of that. Does it apply to the bronzes when design being short of funding? Go ahead, sir.
Through the chair, yes. If you actually look at the picture right behind Councillor Sluss right now, you can see that there's 3 men and 4 women. So it was never intended to have 4 women and 3 men. The plans that the committee made in the 1990s planned for an equal number of men and women. So it would be adding one more man to the left side of the monument. So just off screen from Councillor Sless's right shoulder.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, I'll have an order of whatever the mayor's having.
Much more like
Just secondly, I guess, where was the proposal to relocate them to? To where?
That remains unclear. Colonel Hatfield had some very specific ideas about that, and I think they were going to be located somewhere within that immediate district, perhaps on Tom Thumb Park, perhaps on the Armory, on the Cenotaph property, perhaps across the street next to Prominence Point. But I don't believe we ever did hear from him as to specifics about that, Councillor.
Okay, it's just, I've got a bit of recollection of the statues as they are today. It was actually Derek Pite that was, he was fundraising to make those because he got quite put out with me. I think that was in '92. I was chairing, at that time we had a grants committee, and he came to the grants committee. We gave him money for some of this statue work, but in his opinion, we didn't give them enough. And he was quite put out with me because I was chairing it. And so I took the flack because the committee didn't approve it. But it was a fundraising effort. It wasn't the city doing, supplying the money to create these statues. The city participated through the grants process, but we didn't, we weren't the funding, we were one of the partners, but I believe there were several, and it was Derek Pite on behalf of, I don't think himself, I think the Legions were involved. And I think if we're looking at an eighth one, and I think these things were quite expensive. They're not cheap. And he spent a lot of time generating money that I'm just wondering, we're looking to try and find money to do it. Perhaps, again, this could be a cause taken on by somebody to finish Derek's work, because he was at an age already then that it was tough for him getting around and doing the things that he had to do. But it would, I think it would be good to fulfill what he tried to do back in the '90s. So I think it's a good idea to be doing it. I'm not convinced that we should be funding it, because we should participate in the funding, but I don't think we should be writing the entire check.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Carpenter, I forget, are you next in the queue?
No, I'm good.
Anything else, guys? We'll go to the question on the amendment then. Those in favor? And now on the main motion, those in favor? Okay, that's good. Thank you. Now, let's see what's next here. Next is the additional names of the fallen. Any comment or question or amendment on that? Mr. Carpenter, go ahead, please.
I would hope that would be in consultation with the Great War Centennial Committee.
Councillor, you may want to just insert that as an amendment to be sure.
Yes, okay, I'll add inscribing the fallen names. Yes, yeah, I would add in consultation with the Great War Centennial Committee.
Can we have a seconder for that? Councillor Sless, thank you. Anything else, Councillor Carpenter?
No, I think that covers it. But this is, I know we've got it by second quarter 21. I don't know if that's doable or not, but at least by third quarter 21, before the next Remembrance Day, when COVID's over, we can all present there. I think it's important. It's also important too that some of these are Six Nations individuals that haven't been recognized, and that's really important that we consult with our Six Nations folks as well. So maybe you could add that in there as well. So
consultation with GWCA and with Six Nations Council.
Six Nations Veterans Organization. There's an organization, Six Nations Veterans.
Okay, and remind me who the seconder was? Councillor Sless, thank you. Okay, well, let's go to the question on Councillor Carpenter's amendments. Those in favor? And that's unanimous. And back to the main motion. Any further discussion? Okay, let's vote. Those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, so our next item is changes to War Memorial Park. Does everybody have that one? And it's moved and seconded and on the floor. Discussion? We'll good, wait a minute. So these would be upgrades to better permit the use of that site, specifically on November 11th, to improve the carrying capacity and ease of movement for folks who don't move so well. Any additional commentary, guys? Councilor Carpenter?
Again, I really think that we're referring this back to estimates again, and I think it should be referred to Parks and Rec for how they can insert this in their capital budget.
Okay, a seconder for that. Councilor Utley, thank you. Any discussion on the amendment? We'll go to the vote. Those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And back to the main motion. Any additional discussion, guys? Councilor Sless?
Yeah, I'm just reading here. It says that Public Works will report back to our committee in Q4 of 2021 with a plan and a budget. Second bullet point.
Suggesting a change there, Councilor?
Well, I'm reading that, and then I'm reading that we're sending it to estimates. How can we be sending it to estimates when we're not going to get a budget or a plan until the Q4 of 2021? The two things are at odds with each other.
Right. So delete the visit to estimates? Is that your suggestion, John?
Yeah, I would say so, because we're not in a position to do that until we get bullet 2 done.
Okay. Seconder is Councilor Carpenter. Thank you. Councilor Sless, anything additional?
Oh, that's good. Thanks.
Okie doke. Any other discussion on this amendment before we go to the vote? That's to take. Mayor Davis, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I just want to confirm. So when is this going to council for approval? Right, all these resolutions we're doing today, they're going to go up to.
This comes to Committee of the Whole December.
Okay.
Sorry,
Any
through the
additional?
chair.
Sorry.
If I may, just through the chair, there's also, so there's the motion in which you're seeking to strike about the referral to the estimates committee, because instead the report is going to come back to the Howitzer task force. The final clause there, that if approved by estimates committee, that Public Works be directed to implement it. I would also suggest striking that, as it's reliant upon a motion that you now are striking. So
Councilor
when the
Carpenter
budget
moves
comes
it.
back.
Thank
Okay,
you.
perfect. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Yeah. Who's the seconder? Councilor Sless, thank you. Councilor Utley, rather, sorry. Okay, so I don't see any further hands up, so we'll go to the question on this amendment. Those in favor? And that's unanimous. And then back to the resolution as amended, Councilor Carpenter?
I think it's fine now. Only you
Okay.
could have steered us through this, Marat.
Oh, you're too kind. Okay, on the question as amended, let's vote. Those in favor? And that's unanimous. Okay, so our next item then is addition of 2 bronze figures to Brant War Memorial. We'll take a second to get that up. So this relates to the completion of the work as originally designed by Walter Allward, I believe. Sarah, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, discussion. Everybody got it? So this is giving direction to staff to further investigate. Councilor Carpenter.
Yes, this also directs staff to report back to committee of the whole. I think the staff should report back with these numbers back to this committee because, at this cost of 800,000 to 1.6 million, we may decide not to proceed at this time. We may decide to recommend not to proceed at this time. Going back to committee of the whole, fourth quarter, I'm not sure if that's the right way. I'm just thinking out loud here, but this doesn't, the public is, and the mayor pointed this out, the public, may not be as enamored about making this exactly as Mr. Allward had wanted, but to add 2 more figures at a cost of $1.6 million this time, I don't know if that's politically palatable. So I would prefer this came back to the committee. We see what the actual numbers are and a time frame that makes this more reasonable.
Okay, so the amendment then is to have this, change the wording to be referred back to the committee following investigation, right?
Yes, and funding.
Right, and I see Councilor Utley as the seconder. So we'll address the amendment now. Is there any comment or discussion on the amendment? Okay, let's vote. Those in favor? And that's unanimous. So back to the resolution as amended, to have it come back to us rather than to COW. Any additional discussion or comments, guys? Then we'll go to the vote. Those in favor? And that's unanimous as well. No. Okay, I believe that concludes all the items for consideration, if I'm following my own agenda package correctly. Co-Chair Utley, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed at the end of 4.3 is the motion moved by Councillor Van Tilborg that the restoration of the field Howitzer working group be renamed to be the War Memorial and Cenotaph Working Group. That was carried unanimously, but I don't think that ever went to Committee of the Whole or Council for approval.
Julia?
Just through the chair, that motion itself, I can queue up in the report that's going to go forwards already. So that's already on my radar to make sure that gets ratified.
Great. That's excellent. And through you again, Mr. Chair, to Julia, I chaired, it shows me chairing the meeting in February this year. And my question is, as chair, could I have seconded or moved any motion? I don't think I could have moved a motion.
Correct. You, as the chair, it's preferable that the chair does. Well, the chair cannot move, but you can second.
But the minutes reflect that I moved. In fact, under consent items, I moved an item for the minutes of the July 27, 19 meeting. So can we change that? Would somebody be willing to move that in place of my name?
As a correction to the minutes, that's fine. We can do so.
Councillor Carpenter volunteered. Thank you. So if you could reflect that, please, I'd be able to sleep at night.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, folks. I was also remiss in not recognizing Councillor Sless's idea about giving direction to staff to investigate funding sources from other levels of government. Councillor, did you want to introduce that at this point? Councillor Sless?
Yes, I will.
You're on mute, Dan.
Darn that mute button. Although it's better than misspeaking and saying something that you thought was just in your head, right? So Councillor Sless's amendment, or sorry, his resolution then would be for staff to investigate funding from other sources for the projects identified. Does that kind of sum it up? And seconder would be Councillor Carpenter. And is there any discussion on that item, guys? Okay, let's go to the vote. Then those in favor? And that's unanimous as well. So now that, unless there's anything else, any other things for, oh, Councilor Carper, go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm wondering, in light of our mandate, if we couldn't move a resolution, have the clerk review what we're doing here and suggest a cleaning up wording of our mandate. I think would be make our mandate clear so that we're following it clear.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. And let's consider that an amendment. Do you want to consider that a resolution or an amendment to something that we're doing here?
I'm happy.
I guess we don't have anything on the floor to amend. So that would be a resolution that you're bringing, Councillor, and the seconder would be Councillor Utley. And Julie, did you get the wording?
That clerk staff, in conjunction with with city staff, review and recommend the working group changes to the working group mandate.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any comments? Then let's vote. Those in favor? That carries. And apparently neither the chair nor the staff have any concern with moving these resolutions today without having given prior notice of motion. And if anybody asks, we won't squeal on ourselves, guys, right? Okay.
Through the chair, everything did carry unanimously, so the required 2/3 is fine as well. And
Okay.
just before I let you go, although we did note the change for the minutes, we actually do not have a mover and seconder for approval of the current minutes if you were getting there.
We moved and seconded everything that was before us today in one block at the outset.
Okay, so if we
Yeah,
could just
so
do a
the-
separate vote on that then?
Okay, yep, sorry. So the vote as requested by staff would be those in favor? And that carries, and that applies to the changes to the minutes, Julia, right?
That is correct.
Great, okay. We don't need to do a further vote on that because that was to the changes. No resolutions. Anybody have a notice of motion? Notice of motion, Councillor Utley?
No notice of motion, Mr. Chair, but when can staff get back to us with some of these recommendations? And I ask because I really would like to have some of our other partners, the 56 and GWCA, at our next meeting. So if we can get some or at least an advance notice so that we can communicate with our partners. The other thing is, does staff need the contact information for the 56 and GWCA and any other partners that they may not have?
If staff don't have that info, if you want to circulate a memo to Councillor Utley, Councillor Carpenter, and I, we have all that information in our Rolodexes currently.
Through the chair, my video, I keep getting an alert that I can't start the video because the host has stopped it. So this is Sarah Monroe speaking. I do have all of that contact information. And once we get direction from council, staff will start undertaking the directions included in today's meeting.
Okay, so can we, rather than asking when we can have our next meeting, can we schedule our next meeting for early in December? And then if there's anything that we have that's further productive, we can circulate it to council before year end. Can we go ahead and arrange that, please, staff, for an early December meeting? And Councillor Carpenter, you had your hand up?
Yes, if I sort of beg your indulgence, I'd like to serve notice of motion that the committee meet with the Great War Centenary to discuss sustainability of the archives of the World War I and the coming World War II veterans archives.
Councillor, I can, if I could just add to that, I did have a chat with Jeffrey when we were at Remembrance Day, you and I and Greg, and he thought that it would be a good idea to undertake what you and I and he discussed with respect to trying to migrate some of that to the city's server and web presence. Okay, so he's keen on going ahead with that, and he had a couple of other ideas that I'll share with you as well. Okay, so seeing nothing else before us, thank you all for your indulgence today. And thanks to staff for cobbling all this stuff together in a timely fashion so that we'd have it on our plates today. We'll meet again in December, and thanks again for attending. Any of you at home that are watching today, God bless you.